Welcome, I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 41, written by user Audaciousboo. It was a cold Christmas Eve in Texas. She and her sister went out to play outside with her new telescope. What they saw baffled them, burning a memory into their minds that has endured for decades. I was 9. It was Christmas Eve, 1988, and my family's Christmas Eve party was winding down. My grandma was digging through the remnants of boxes, bows, and wrapping papers from our family's white elephant gift exchange to see what she could salvage for next year. My mom and aunt were laughing and trading stories of holidays past. My two older half-sisters, Sherry and Penny, who were adults at the time, being 18 and 20 years older than me, were picking over the leftovers on the dining room table. I was sitting near the back of the Christmas tree, where 3 gifts with my name on them remained. These were from my mom and grandma, and as it was a tradition that I could only open 1 gift before bedtime on Christmas Eve, the rest I had to wait and open my Santa gifts on Christmas morning. I assessed the 3 packages for some time before making my selection. It was nearing midnight. I had to be in bed soon, so I decided to just pick the biggest because it had weight, and it didn't sound like clothes when I shook it. When my mom said it was time, I eagerly unwrapped the gift. At my grandma's unspoken request, I was careful not to rip the paper or mess up the bow, and set them aside as my gift was revealed. It was a telescope. It wasn't a high-quality count the rings of Saturn type though. It was small, mostly made of plastic, and still had the $14.99 price sticker on the box. I was gracious, though I was not impressed. Not because of the quality, I didn't know the difference between a nice telescope and a cheap toy one, but because I simply had no interest in its function, and even if I was interested in what it did, the simple assembly required to make it work exceeded the grasp of my exceptionally short attention span. Now my sister Sherry is the oldest, and to me back then, she was like a bossy hall monitor. She had no real authority, but that didn't stop her from trying to run everything. I'm 41 now, and she is 61, and seriously, not much has changed in that aspect. My other sister Penny is just 2 years younger than Sherry, so she would have been 29 at the time. She was different. A combination of unattended schizophrenia and drug abuse made her the wild card, meaning you never knew what you were going to get with her. On this night, she had managed to maintain a level of normalcy, a jovial mood, though under any circumstances at the time, and regardless of her behavior, her personality seemed more comparable to mine rather than to any of the adults in the room. Penny took an enthusiastic interest in my new gift, and asked if we could go out back and test it out. I agreed, knowing that my compliance would afford me a bit more time before I had to go to bed, and being a child on the night before Christmas, I was naturally restless. Penny and I ascended onto the back porch. In no time at all, my sister had the telescope assembled and in position for celestial exploration. It took her a bit longer to find a point of focus and adjust all the little knobs for optimal viewing. So while she was occupied with that, my attention was drawn to the icicles that had formed on the awning and the dog's water bowl that had turned to solid ice. Being a Texan, this isn't generally common, even for December, though it isn't generally uncommon either. Our winters are short, and much like my eccentric sister, you never know what you're going to get when it arrives. I feel the need to preface this next part of the story with 2 very important points. First, I need to say that my memory of this incident, however perplexing, is as clear and as vivid to me now as the very night it occurred, so this is a true and accurate account. Secondly, this entire event lasted no more than a minute, and while I must describe these events in succession, many of them occurred all at once. I had just taken off my mittens so I could utilize the full function of my hands and fingers for grasping, when I heard Penny exclaim in amusement, "Whoa, cool." Well, I had no interest at all in stargazing and was far more focused on trying to retrieve the perfect icicle from the awning, using a garden hoe. I didn't even look up from what I was doing, figuring she had managed to find something bright to look at, and that just meant I had a bit more time to spend on trying to dislodge the big beautiful icicle before it melted. Then it occurred to me that the icicle was melting, and quite rapidly so, when just moments before it was still in the process of forming. Now it's dripping like a leaky faucet. And what was even stranger was that all this water was dripping around me, yet it made no sound. Nothing made a sound at all, not the water or the wind or the highway in the distance. Not even my sister tinkering with the telescope. When the dripping slowed, and I don't mean that in the sense that there was more time between each drop, but rather the droplets were taking longer to fall to the ground. Confused as I was, I immediately looked over at my sister and found her standing upright, not bent over peering into the telescope, but staring out into the yard. I turned to match her gaze, and what I saw completely eluded the grasp of my 9-year-old comprehension. Hovering a mere 4 feet above my backyard fence was an almond-shaped capsule about the size of a pontoon boat. It was a metallic color, resembling chrome, with no discernible crevices, no windows, no doors. It was completely flush, and even though it had no fixtures for lights to shine from, the area around it was completely illuminated as light reflected off of millions of water droplets now suspended in midair. I was struck with fear and confusion as I broke my gaze just long enough to look over at my sister, searching for some sort of sign as to what this thing was, and if we were in any danger. Penny looked over at me, grinning from ear to ear. "Cindy Boo, it's a UFO!" I didn't hear her say it, and her lips didn't move. But that's what she said. We both looked back at the object, and it tilted slightly downward. At this angle, it appeared to be spinning as a flash of iridescent lights made one complete rotation around its exterior. Then in a split second, it shot straight up and disappeared into the night sky. Darkness resumed, along with all the sounds of the night and the crisp chill of the air. I stood there, dumbfounded, amazed, and terrified by what I'd just experienced, while at the same time, I felt relief that it was over, and even a certain sense of excitement. I didn't know whether to run away, cry, or laugh. I looked over at my sister, wanting to run to her, but still frozen to the place I stood, as if all my cognitive resources were occupied, trying to process everything. I was momentarily unable to communicate movement to my legs. Penny was not frightened by what we had just witnessed. She seemed just as blissful as I'd ever seen her before, and while at times I found that refreshing, in this instance, it confused me. I needed to observe a regular adult response. Reclaiming the use of my legs, I ran towards the door, saying, "Let's go tell Mom." "Yeah." Penny agreed and followed me through the back door. I was glad she was there and had my back. I knew there was no way my mom would believe a spaceship story if it had been only me recounting it. Running in with my Kmart telescope, we entered the dining room where my mom stood, laughing as my grandma sang the phrase, "We won't go until we get some." I exclaimed, "Mom, me and Penny just saw a..." I briefly forgot what my sister had called it, but she chimed in to assist. "A UFO," Penny injected. "You did? With your new telescope?" Mom inquired. "No, it was in the backyard by my fort, right above the fence, and..." I wanted to tell her everything all at once, but I just wasn't fast or articulate enough to express what had all transpired. My mom was a regular adult who saw me as an imaginative child, and my sister as well as a somewhat mild version of the crazy person she expected to show by the end of the night. "Maybe it was Santa. I hope he doesn't pass you up because you're not in bed." I didn't believe in Santa Claus. I never did. I just pretended for as long as I could for extra presents. I did understand the situation I was in, though. I knew Mom was done for the night and wanted me to go to bed so she could set up the Santa gifts and finally get some rest herself. Not to mention, she was usually well within the bounds of good insight by steering away from conversations featuring supernatural events with my sister. It just so happened that on this occasion it was all true, and I understood that she would never know that. Shortly after that, a movie came out called Fire in the Sky, starring D.B. Sweeney, a based on true events film about a small town man who was allegedly abducted by aliens, experimented on, and returned several days later. The movie, coupled with my memory of that event, terrified me beyond expression, causing me to have night terrors throughout my childhood about the visitors returning to claim me, and I'm certain it initiated my lifelong battle with sleep paralysis dreams. I was so terrified I wouldn't watch or read anything at all that had to do with extraterrestrials, and I wouldn't speak of it again for nearly 30 years. Somewhere in that period of time, I convinced myself that the entire event had been a terrible nightmare that I had just happened to remember every single detail of, down to the mittens I was wearing, where they landed on the ground, when I took them off, and the rush of heat I felt, hot on my cheeks from the fireplace when I ran back into the house that night. My sister was estranged for many years throughout my childhood, as her condition got worse before it began to get better finally. She got clean and got on the right meds, and a few years ago, she came to live with us. The first week she was here, we spent a lot of time talking about different things that had happened over the years, things she'd said and done. I discovered that she had barely any recollection of a great deal of it, claiming, "That must have been the other me." I guess I got caught up in the spirit of sharing, or I got brave or something, but I decided to ask her about that night during one of our talks. "Do you remember that one Christmas Eve?" is all I got out of my mouth before she responded with, "You mean the night where we saw that UFO in the backyard?" That's a memory that stuck. I remember it as clear as yesterday. She then proceeded to describe the experience from her perspective with very little variation from my own experience. So there it is. It was not a dream. It was not my 9-year-old imagination. All those little details that made no sense, the ones I used to tell myself it didn't happen, are the same details that later on affirmed the reality of it. I saw a UFO in my backyard on Christmas Eve, 1988. I was 9 years old. Case notes, file number 41. There are many UFO accounts I believe to be fictional, intended to misdirect people or garner personal attention, fame, money. This is not one of those accounts. What a riveting way to describe your experience. I don't have much to add on a personal account, since I've never witnessed any sort of alien interaction at all, nothing strange in the skies either. One thing that excites me, outside of the clear superiority of these aliens, technologically speaking, is the proof positive that we've achieved so far as a species is as limited as cavemen achieving fire. Just the fact that gravity can be manipulated as they're able to, that alone would be a groundbreaking paradigm shift in every respect. I mean, exploring the stars, colonizing Mars, asteroid belts, etc. all becomes trivial if we manage to achieve that level of technology. How they do it, of course, is well beyond us for now, and maybe it should remain that way. As the author replied, saying that such technology would be dangerous for us at the moment. And perhaps she's correct. We have to get there of our own accord, if we're able to. Case file number 42, written by user Arijas. A case of dropped box cutters vanishing completely, then reappearing later in his manager's office. I work as an overnight stalker in a grocery store in my city. Part of my job, of course, is opening boxes. Every employee is given a box cutter with their name on it, so if it gets lost, we know who to return it to. We also have these carts we push around that carry the boxes we stock, giving us a place to set things we aren't actively using. I cut open a box, set my box cutter on the cart, then went to set the box on the cart as well, so I could pull things out of it. In that process, the box knocked my box cutter on the ground. I leaned over to pick it up, but it was gone. I couldn't find it, so I asked my manager for a spare. Important, the spares don't have our names on them. Towards the end of my shift, I'm walking to the back room and my manager comes up, confused, holding my box cutter and says, "Hey, this was somehow on my desk." Her office is locked during working hours because she's on the floor helping us. So how my box cutter got from my section to her desk through a locked door is beyond me, but you bet I'll be attaching it to my belt loop from now on. Case notes, file number 42. Another classic vanishing story object. These touch my brain especially, given that it's the only glitch I've personally experienced. A tennis ball just vanishing as I go to throw it. Anyways, per your glitch, if I were to offer a solution of the mundane realm, perhaps the box cutter fell on the ground, bounced far away out of sight, somehow. Any nooks or crannies it could have wound up in. And then another fellow employee found it and put it on your manager's desk. The only problem with that, of course, is you said the manager's office is always locked. So I'm not sure how they got around that. Yeah, weird. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and also subscribe on up. I'm always uploading more stories. See you there.